Hello and welcome to the section of Mastering Excel. And what we're going to do in this section is we're going to learn about the user interface of Excel. Specifically, we're going to learn about the menu structure at the top of the screen and sort of get our bearings for where we can find very important functions there at the top. Now, really, I call this a menu, but really the right terminology is the ribbon. This entire area that spans across the width of the screen is called the ribbon interface. So if you ever see somebody refer to it as a ribbon, that's what they're talking about. It's just a ribbon interface at the top. And this is quite a bit different than Excel used to look maybe 5 or 6 or 7 years ago if you were using an older version. So you kind of need to get used to this ribbon interface. And once you get used to it, it's actually very, very powerful. So what you'll see at the top, for instance, is right now we're on the Home tab. Now these are different tabs. We have Insert tab, Page Layout tab, and so on. And so what you'll be doing is flipping through them there. So we have the Home tab. This is where you'll spend a lot of your time. You can see that you have very common things. You can make things bold and underline and italics. You can change the font, of words or whatever inside that you've typed in down here. Now remember, all of the things here are applying to whatever you've typed into these cells down below. You can make, change the color of the font. You can change the background color. Things like alignment, center, left justified, right justified. A lot of this stuff is very similar to a word processor. But this is the kind of thing that you're going to find on the Home menu, the general things that you're going to be using all the time. All right, you'll see some things over on the right-hand side. You can format entries in terms of a table. You have certain cell styles that you can have predefined that Microsoft has for you. Those things aren't required. They're just very easy ways to apply formatting to what you have on the screen. You can also insert and delete cells, and you can sort some data and things like that. Now, we're going to get into a lot more detail of how to use all these things, but by and large, the Home tab on the ribbon menu is really the most common things that you might be doing. It deals with typing things in, changing the color, changing the alignment, and so on. Now, if you go to the Insert tab, these are things that you might be inserting into your sheet. For instance, if you want to insert a picture into your sheet, if you want to insert a chart, you would be using these here, right? These are different kinds of charts. In fact, if you click one of these, you'll get different kinds of bar charts. If you click one of these down here, you'll get different kinds of line charts and so on. You can insert hyperlinks, web links. You can insert Greek symbols. You can insert equations. If you're doing lots of math, you can put equations in there. So the Insert menu or the Insert tab of the ribbon is really exactly what it sounds like. You're inserting things into your worksheet. Now, Page Layout is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to be applying layout to the existing page. So the size, the orientation, whether it's portrait or landscape, for printing, the margins that you'll be setting up, things like that. So formatting as applied to how it looks on the screen and also how it prints. And we'll be getting into these things a little bit more later when we talk about printing. Then we have the Formulas tab. This is really where the horsepower of Excel comes in, because you can see how many different types of mathematical functions and formulas that Excel has. We can sum things together. We can average them. You have a recently used list of what you might have recently used. If you're a finance person, you might be using a lot of these different kinds of formulas for interest or, mortgage calculations, things like that. The Logical tab is going to have if statements. You can actually kind of do simple programming in Excel. And so you have if, then type of statements that you can apply to data. These would be applied to text. Very specific kinds of formula to text. You have lots of date and time things. You can get the number of seconds and the number of days in the year and things like that. You can apply functions to dates if you have a chart that's full of dates. And you have some reference things here, and you have math here, which is, what I like to do a lot. I'm the math tutor at Math Tutor DVD, right? So you have your sines and your cosines and lots of your advanced mathematical functions. And then you have more functions. So you can see under more, you have even more functions. I have lots and lots of statistical functions here that I would be using, constantly if I were doing a lot of statistical analysis. Engineering, these are very advanced functions that you would use for engineering calculations, and so on. So you can go down here if you have a few minutes and just look at them. You're not expected to know what these do. You would probably have to look in the help system to figure out what these are, but you can kind of see that if you hover over, for instance, statistical, and hover over it, it's going to tell you that it returns the average of the absolute deviations of data points and so on. So if you were a statistical person, you would understand what that meant, and you'd be able to apply this function to the numbers here, number 1 and number 2, which would be in your worksheet. So when you have the formula tab, you're literally going to be going in and hunting around for the proper formula for what you are trying to do, and Excel has it all laid out in a nice way. Now the data tab is if you're using your data in your worksheet in terms of sorting your data. You can sort it alphabetically. You can filter the data. There's also database interfacing that Excel can do, and that's what a lot of this page does. It's a little bit more advanced, but anytime you're dealing with databases or sorting, you're going to be coming here. The Review tab has your spell check, your thesaurus, and just a few other things. You know, you can add comments in here if you want to add a comment and then give this worksheet off to Betty in finance department. You can add a comment in there, things like that if you want to hand this off for review. And then under the view guy here, you can change the zoom of the worksheet. You know, I can go back out to 50% zoom, you know, and see a lot more of my worksheet. If I want to go back to 100%, I can hit that. And so it's a lot of things dealing with how the actual worksheet looks. I can turn the grid lines on and off of the worksheet, you know, things like that. And then finally, you have the Acrobat tab, and that's if you want to export this into Adobe Acrobat PDF. All right. Now, so we've talked about the different, the ribbon menu. We've talked about the tabs. Now, I want to show you that inside of a tab, for instance, we're in the Home tab now. Notice that there's the font group. So this word font means that everything in here deals with fonts. So if I want to go and look at my sales thing and I want to change the font and make it a little bit bigger, I can do that. If I want to make it bold, I can do that, and so on. I can change the color, the foreground and the background color. This is the alignment group. So this is wrapping text, centering, and so on. So I just want you to be aware that you can read these little titles here for the groups. This is going to be dealing with cells. This is going to be dealing with styles. This is going to be dealing with numbers and things like that. Now, I want to point out to you something that you probably have already noticed, and that is the tooltips. So if I hover over a lot of these things, you'll see that a tooltip pops up. So if I want to know what wrap text is, I can kind of read about it even without going into the help system. I can see that how this wraps the text in here. I can go into merge and center and kind of get a quick description of what this stuff is. So if you get stuck, just hover your mouse over it. Like we're doing here, and it'll tell you pretty much what everything does in the ribbon. All right. Now, one other thing I want to show you is some of these groups have a little arrow at the bottom right. So if you click that, it'll pop up with what they're calling a dialog box, right? A dialog box. And so when you have a little button like that, it means, hey, there's even more stuff that wouldn't fit on the ribbon. So if you click that, you can see a lot more, you know, capability. I can do a strike through, you know, if I want to do a strike through, the sales now has a strike through it. I can make superscripts and subscripts, and in general, I just have a little bit more control over there. So if you see a little button like this, then there's generally going to be another little flyout menu that you can dig into if you have to do even more than what's available on the ribbon interface. All right. Now, finally, we've talked about all of these tabs, but the one we haven't talked about is the File tab, because it's quite different. If you click on the File tab, then the screen changes completely, and you're kind of taken away from your workbook, and now you have all of the way to create a new document, to open documents, to save, to print, export, and things like that. So to go back out of here, you can hit Escape, or you can go ahead and just click this arrow and get back to your worksheet. Right? And so the final thing I want to show you is that I've shown you a lot of the tooltips like this. Now notice if you hover over some of these items, the bold, for instance, has Control B. This is telling you the keyboard shortcut if there exists one. If I want to underline, I can do Control U. If I want to do italics, I can do Control I. So if you ever need to know what a keyboard shortcut is, you can just hover over and look at it. So that is an overview of the user interface of Microsoft Excel. You have the ribbon interface at the top. You have the different tabs that you can go and click through and get to what you want to quickly. You can hover over almost anything and see a little synopsis of what it is. You can get tooltips if you need to. You can click on this little arrow down here and get even more capability to make any changes that you need. And in order to open, save, and create new files, you need to go here into the File area. Microsoft calls this the Backstage view. So when you click on File, you're in the Backstage view, and then you pop out of it and you get back to your worksheet. So make sure you understand this stuff. Go fire up Excel, get comfortable with the interface, click on these tabs, look at the tooltips, and then follow me on to the next section where we will continue learning about Microsoft Excel.